We are dealing with a waste crisis in Connecticut. Not everybody may be aware of it. And more municipalities are looking for solutions. My name is Cheryl Baldwin, and I work for the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection in the Sustainable Materials Management Group. I want to make sure that we can increase compost literacy in the state. And residents not only can do something themselves to help with the waste crisis, but it's really to create a finished product as well that you can use in your garden or for houseplants. When I'm cooking, I create a lot of materials for the compost. Everything from if I was doing potatoes or sweet potatoes, even if I had like a little rotted part, peels from carrots, ends of cabbage, maybe even the hearts of things. Sometimes people don't like the hearts. When the lettuce is too yucky and I can't use it anymore, that can go in the compost. Eggshells are good for the compost. A lot of people ask about tea bags. What about tea bags? Yes to tea bags, but I take off the little paper. Some people take off the string. Coffee grounds are fine in your compost bin. If you have a plant you don't want to deal with, that could go in the compost too. I have a garden. Sometimes the roots come up and you can just pull it right off, or you can cut it, and I put the whole root in. What about plate scrapings? Somebody didn't eat all their dinner? All of that can go in. At this point, that was some kale and some lentil curry and some rice. Bones is a no. I've got lots of chicken bones here. We're just gonna say no, we're gonna throw them right into the trash. What you shouldn't allow in there are stickers. You should not put stickers in your compost, and of course banana peels can go right in. You'll find a lot of different designs. This is the one that I happen to use, and it's got a little handle. It might take us 5 days, maybe it might take us 10, depending on how much we're cooking that week. And then when I have a moment, especially if it's not raining or snowing out, I will bring it out then.
I started composting concerned by what was happening with all this organic waste that we were throwing into the trash. Then I learned there was no landfills anymore here in New Haven, and I asked myself, well, what's happening with all our trash? And all our trash was being burned in municipal incinerations. One of the ways that we can reduce the amount of organic waste that goes into our mainstream is to compost ourselves in our backyard.
When you're creating a compost pile, think about what do you have on hand. You don't really want to spend a fortune. This is something that's supposed to be, you're recycling what you have on property. So we separate the materials that contain a lot of carbon into what we call browns, and the materials that contain a lot of nitrogen into what we call greens. If you want decomposition to occur, there should be about 25 times as much carbon as nitrogen. So these are our sources of browns that are usually pretty readily available or are pretty cost effective. Number one is leaves. I do not think there's anybody in New England that does not have enough leaves. Another source would be animal bedding, emulsion hay, shredded newspapers, your toilet paper rolls, your paper towel rolls. Kitchen scraps are predominantly green. You can use coffee grounds. You can use the filters from coffee grounds. It's not a problem. If you're deadheading your flowers, you could put that in. You could put in, small prunings from trees and shrubs. If you have an invasive species, or even if it's not quite as invasive as mugwort, it's not blooming yet, there's no weed seeds in it. So again, take your trusty clippers out, you can cut it into smaller pieces, and then you definitely do not want to put the roots of things like mugwort in your pile because they're just going to germinate. So these are wood ashes from the fireplace. They contain different chemical compounds, so you don't want to use them in your compost pile. I know a lot of people get these compost bags and they're supposed to be compostable, and they would be compostable if you had a large-scale compost operation. But for the backyard composter, if you just put your food scraps in there, you take it out to your compost pile, and you're not maintaining it on a high level, probably in a year you're still going to find the bag. So we're going to start our pile. It's a really good idea to not just set your heavy food waste or even some of the green waste on the ground. So what you want to do at first is put something that's going to add a little bit of porosity. Some people use a pallet on the bottom, some people put some boards. The purpose for this is we need some airflow. And then usually for the second layer, you'd want to put some sort of browns down. And in this case, we're going to use leaves. So you'd start with the bottom, you have about a 6-inch layer, and then you're going to be adding food scraps from your kitchen to it. The layers don't have to stay actually as layers. Eventually you're going to be incorporating, mixing them all in there. You can get these compost thermometers and stick it in there, and the compost thermometer will heat up to 140, 150, 160 degrees. And you would leave that, and then when the temperature starts going down, it indicates to you it's time for you to turn it.
There's the traditional way of turning the pile using a fork. If you have another bin, you can transfer the contents of that bin to another bin, and that's a way you turn it. You can always fluff it also, just go into the material and fluff it. But also, as things start to break down, they start to crumble, they start to get compacted. And in that situation, you can create conditions where there's no air.
The microbes need air. They process the waste aerobically, so with oxygen, just like we process it aerobically.
And where there's no air, you're going to select for other type of microorganisms that thrive in anaerobic conditions, and they are the ones that might bring you pathogens, that might bring you foul odor.
Vinegar, it can smell like methane, it can smell like rotten eggs or sulfuric acid, and that's not what we don't want those smells. So we want to use a variety of materials to break it up. Typically compost, the organic material you put in a compost pile gets reduced down by about 50%. But if this is all you had for week 1, this is fine. You could use this for week 1, you could mix it up, and then week 2 you bring out your next bucket of food scraps and you add some more browns to it, and you keep on building until it gets to be probably at least 2 to 3 feet high if possible, or till it gets to the point where you feel you can't comfortably turn it. You know your compost is ready when it's dark, it has a nice earthly smell to it, and just about all of the materials that you put in your compost pile are no longer recognizable. And this is a wonderful, wonderful amendment to add to your garden.
You change your mind and see that as a resource and not as waste, then you can look for ways to recycle it.